almost all time zones. This is really quite a Herculean task, I mean, that we did. Dr. Linda and her team, Dr. Domingo, and I've been listening to the killing questions that you people have been asking, but they were very enlightening. I mean, one could see, I mean, um, how many other perspectives could this, belong to the same idea, and then how many different people from different disciplines they interact and they, they develop an absolutely new perspective out of it.
It's such a gift. I love interdisciplinary
It is.
conferences for that reason. We are going to go live in 30 seconds, Ali. So if you want to start loading your slides, I will begin the launch of the webinar.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nexus 2025, session 12, the final session of our 3-day International Interdisciplinary Conference. We are delighted to be presenting the next few speakers, starting with the first presentation of session 12, Building Academic Resilience, Evaluating Performance Assessment to Strengthen Academic Language Learning in ELA. Just a reminder to presenters to welcome the audience in your birth language, if it is not English, before you begin your presentation. Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum. उम्मीद है आप लोग ठीक होंगे. I just said saluted people and greeted and then say hope you're doing well. So good afternoon everyone, my respected colleagues. My name is Ali Abdi and I am full-time faculty member at City University in Canada. I'm truly honored to join you today and share the insights and reflections from a research project that I recently conducted. Now I'm going to show you uh, uh, the structure of my presentation. So this will be the structure of my presentation today. And so a little about background. So there is a growing body of research has documented a significant increase in linguistic and cultural diversity within Canadian schools, which is largely attributable to ongoing immigration trends. And along with this, several provinces, including Alberta, realize that there is a need for increased academic and linguistic demands at every grade level. So with this has come a greater awareness of both instruction of academic language and its increased presence in ELA classroom assessment. This underscores a pressing need for public assessment agencies or commercialized organizations to develop and disseminate high quality and intellectually demanding assessment resources for teachers. And further, research has indicated that many studies, including many studies have indicated that students, including English language learners, have difficulty mastering academic language. They need academic language to succeed academically and professionally, and especially if they have never been explicitly taught in how to use it. And other studies have proven that integrating authentic assessments into academic language instructions warrants students to transfer their language skills to authentic real-world contexts. And such assessments also serve as a robust indicator of students' evolving knowledge and the 21st century competencies that we keep talking about. And they require these things throughout the instructional process. Thus, it was felt that it is imperative for English language arts teachers to build this capacity to design or select or use authentic assessments. Uh, Now, if we look at the ELA program of study standards at elementary level, which you're looking at right now on the screen, we find that there are some elements, the curricula, it requires the students to have a command of of academic language to be able to read and write well in order to reach the rigorous grade level standards. And these language demands included in ELA programs of study. They include reasoning abstractly, for example, or constructing viable arguments and critiquing reasons of others, designing solutions, or maybe engaging in argument from evidence, and of course, problem solving. So this lands us to my research problem. So the research has the research on the relevant topic has revealed that there is no adequate data that could substantially focus on elementary ELA teachers' capability to design, select, and use authentic assessment to promote students' academic language proficiency. And moreover, due to time constraints or inadequate assessment literacy, our elementary ELA teachers, they tend to resort to lower order thinking skills, and they tend to use traditional forms of tests to assess students' journal proficiency in language, which comes at the cost of the crucial aspect of academic language development. And we also learned that underdeveloped academic language can also put our students at particular risk of poor academic achievement. Therefore, due to poor quality assessments, we felt that teachers fail to understand the students' learning difficulties, and or they sometimes make inaccurate assessment of learners' ability, and they sometimes misinterpret assessment as assessment of learning rather than assessment for learning. So this current study that we're looking at examines the quality of ELA performance assessments published by an external assessment agency to promote students' development of academic language proficiency. Now, this study was guided by the following two research questions. One was, what is the quality of ELA performance assessments in grades 1 to 6? Second, to what extent are the ELA performance assessments aligned with the desired learning outcomes of grades 1 to 6 ELA curricula in the province? Now, I'll talk very briefly about the theoretical frameworks that I used that informed and situated my research. So the first one was academic language proficiency. Several studies indicated that teachers understand of academic language as challenging content area vocabulary, or just perhaps difficult words, the use of difficult words. However, I believe, and in this study, we noticed, and the literature manifests, that the concept is much more complex than just the vocabulary. So for the purpose of this study, academic language was conceived as the difference in purpose, audience, and context, and one which is characterized by the use of specific grammatical, lexical, and discursive features in the selection of word formality, sentence structure, and discourse pattern. And many studies have found that students with proficiency in using academic language can apply grammar, vocabulary, and discourse knowledge and skills to meet the language demands, which are required to perform on academic tasks in any content area or discipline. So the three components that the academic language consists of, as you can see, used in the study are vocabulary, syntactical knowledge, and language functions. We focus on these areas which actually academic languages are consisting of. And these are some of the language functions that we found in Alberta's ELA program of study. And my second theoretical framework was authentic assessments in ELA. Since authentic assessment places a strong emphasis on higher order thinking skills such as analysis, evaluation, and synthesis, these skills are essential for students' success in both academic and real-world contexts. Research establishes that all students need to be engaged with authentic and cognitively demanding and challenging language learning and assessment if they want to be successful in schools and in yonder years. So through these assessments, instead of memorizing definitions or isolated facts, students might compare ideas or infer meanings, within a text or create something new. So the processes like this lead to deeper learning and application of skills. That was the main intention. And designing authentic assessments involves assessment tasks that replicate real-world challenges and standards of performance that experts or professionals typically face in the field. And some of the examples of I could relate from ELA classrooms could be students writing a letter to a newspaper editor in response to an imminent issue that the local community could be facing. Another example could be explaining and analyzing a character or an event in a story or suggesting a different ending to a story. So these kind of assessments are deemed authentic because they call for application of English language to solve real-world problems that are so required to develop critical thinking, collaboration, extended communication, and creative problem solving. Now, my last theoretical framework is AIQ, Authentic Intellectual Quality. In this study, I have adapted Dr. Kim Ko's Authentic Intellectual Quality Framework, which was published in 2011. And this AIQ framework offers 6 criteria and sub-criteria for judging the quality of teachers' assessment tasks in a variety of disciplines. And the criteria that I used are depth of knowledge, depth of knowledge and knowledge criticism, knowledge manipulation, sustained writing, clarity in organization, and making connections to the real world beyond classrooms. Now, an interesting part, which is the methodology part, this study conducted an artifact analysis of 27 ELA performance assessments. And the data analysis consists of descriptive, statistical analysis of these performance assessment tasks. This analysis included constructing tables of quantiles and means, and methods of dispersion, such as variance and cross tabulations that were used to carry out many measures of frequency and central frequency. Frequency was used to present a count or a percent. Central tendency was measured with the use of mean scores. The rating of the assessments was based on, again, Coe's AIQ criteria and indicators for English language. So we used a 4-point rating scale for each AIQ criterion to evaluate the level of authentic intellectual quality for a performance assessment, ranging from 1, which meant no evidence or demonstration, to 4, which meant higher evidence or high level of demonstration. As for the results for AIQ, authentic intellectual quality, this study showed that most of the quality of performance assessments at all grade levels were found to fall within the lower scores of on all 6 AIQ criteria. Number 2, performance assessments provided little indication of the achievement of higher order cognitive knowledge and processes like problem solving, critical thinking, and academic language proficiency. Thirdly, the alignment analysis, however, indicated strong relationships between curricular learning outcomes and the performance assessments. We found a very strong relationship. Now, if you look at the screen here, you're looking at the graphical representation of the mean scores for each performance assessments by AIQ sub-criteria. And this one is a grade-wise mean scores on performance assessments. Now, as far as the results for English language proficiency development was concerned, our results showed that most of the performance assessments analyzed made low authentic intellectual demands on students by the teachers, by the assessment tasks. Therefore, we thought that it hindered students from demonstrating academic language proficiency. Second, the performance assessments merely end up measuring the journal proficiency in English language, neglecting the crucial segment of academic language proficiency, which was the aim of the study to find out. Thirdly, ELA programs required a clear framework and standards for describing and operationalizing academic language, which was missing altogether in the documents, the program of study documents. And they needed scaffold language for teachers to be able to design assessment tasks that could authentically incorporate assessment of academic language. Um, in my conclusion, I would, make the study made some recommendation, and my recommendation included creating a professional learning opportunities to develop teacher capacity, to design high quality ELA performance assessments using EIQ, especially in English specialization and assessment courses in higher education, in higher education teacher preparation programs, and in-service teacher workshops as well. Now, if you look at this screen, you're looking at an illustration of mapping of AIQ criteria, which you see horizontally, which was aligned with academic language dimensions vertically on the left, and academic language specific ELA curricular outcomes. So that was my conclusion. And with this, I sincerely thank you for the opportunity to present my research.
That was amazing in terms of content and timeliness. Thank you so much,
Okay.
Dr. Beatty. I really appreciate it. So our second team has not logged into the call, so we are going to be moving directly to Dr. Ron Manley, who is queued up to be our third presenter, but he's going to be taking the second position. If our colleagues from Malaysia and Pakistan are able to join us, then we will add them at the end of the session, and if not, we will go directly to Q&A. So, Dr. Manley, if you want to start your slideshow from the beginning.
Okay, can you hear me okay, Jackie?
Yeah, we can see you. However, you're not in slideshow mode. If you just click from the start right there, that'll expand. There you go. Perfect. Over to you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Ron Manley. I'm with City University of Seattle in Vancouver, continuing faculty. And I'd like to acknowledge that I'm giving this talk on the unceded traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations who have been stewards of this land since time immemorial. Myself and Don Percher, who is a continuing faculty and associate program director of the full-time program at the Vancouver campus, wrote this article on how we've been teaching interpersonal neurobiology to graduate students using a trauma-informed curriculum to instill resiliency and a sense of self-efficacy that is confidence that students can practice in this particular way. Okay, why a course on trauma as part of their training? They're counseling students. They're going to be practicing with clients when they get out into their practicums and internships. Well, Briere and Scott, in their 2025 textbook on the principles of trauma therapy, this is the textbook for the course, report studies suggesting that up to 80% of US adults have experienced at least one significant trauma. And that's excluding cumulative trauma, that is, clients that we see who have experienced more than one trauma. Trauma is prevalent in the general population, as I say, including in students. So we are very cognizant that students that are in our classroom, some students have experienced trauma. And so what we say and how we present the material needs to be very trauma informed. Counseling students are also going to be seeing trauma in their clients, as I say, in their practicums and internships. This is a given. And there's a shortage of therapists trained in trauma psychology. And so what we can contribute to that training, I think, is really important. And a shortage not only people trained and working in trauma, but particularly in somatic forms of psychotherapy, including in polyvagal theory, which is something that we teach in the program. This is, without going into it in detail, a mainstay in the field of trauma these days. And it really focuses on how mammals evolved two branches of the vagus nerve, a ventral vagus or social engagement branch, and an unmyelinated dorsal vagal branch that's arranged. So the autonomic nervous system is arranged in a hierarchy, and people can go from social engagement when under life threat into the sympathetic nervous system, which gears us up to fight or to run away. And failing that we can do that, we go into shutdown, freeze, or a dorsal vagal mode. So what we're wanting to contribute to students' education is that they come out of the course with a solid foundation. Knowledge and skills, we believe, will bolster the resilience and self-efficacy of students to the effects of vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, and burnout, and that they can practice more effectively in this area. So our hope is that we're contributing to the building of resilience when they actually do get out and practice in this area, which can be a very challenging area for any clinicians to work in. Okay, why interpersonal neurobiology? Well, this is a field that was developed in the late 1990s and pioneered by Dr. Dan Siegel and many others. Dr. Alan Shore is another very important person in this area. And interestingly, students, when I do the introductions with them at the beginning of the course, often express some concern that they don't have a background in biology and are a little bit worried about getting into this kind of material. And I tell students that by midway through the course, they're all going to be speaking like neuroscientists. And so it's very gratifying to hear hallway conversations. Students are talking about the hippocampus and the amygdala and so on. So that's a great thing about this. Interpersonal neurobiology is also very interdisciplinary, so it includes the fields of clinical psychology, developmental psychology, traumatology, the neurosciences, field of attachment. Contemplative traditions and practices includes yoga, mindfulness, meditation practices. And Dan Siegel has talked about the similarities, what he called consilience, across these different fields. So they're all saying very, very similar things. And I do say to students, it's a very exciting time to be becoming a therapist because all of these different fields are speaking a very similar language. It's interpersonal because we're a social species, which really focuses us on the role of early attachment processes. And we also talk about this concept of integration in the brain, both vertical integration and horizontal integration, because trauma can result in fragmentation. And so integration is important. And the client symptoms are best understood within the context of the brain or an understanding of this, the limbic system and the autonomic system, which I'm sure you're aware includes the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. Main focus. So the terminology is important because the term trauma has become really diluted in our culture. We hear that a lot in everyday language. And in fact, there's some evidence to suggest that disclosing of one's trauma is a way of mitigating responsibility for causing harm to others. We see that in some legal cases that come up. So we have to be aware of that. So what we have adopted is this definition of trauma. The trauma is a nervous system state. It's not in the event, it's in the nervous system. So somebody that's experienced a traumatic event, the event may have happened many years ago, but we see when we're meeting with the person that it's reflected in the autonomic nervous system in the here and now. So we use a beaker analogy. If you can imagine, you can see the beaker here, um, that when challenging events happen, these get thrown into the beaker. So the analogy is the beaker is our nervous system, autonomic nervous system, and it becomes progressively full over time, depending on adverse events that we experience, to the point where when some clients come in to see us, they're completely overwhelmed because there's no more room in the beaker. So we use this analogy with students. They find it very helpful to imagine the nervous system in this way. And we tell them that if we can help our clients to empty the beaker even a little bit, freeing up some space, that's a definition of resilience and enables our clients and ourselves to tackle or face other circumstances that may have resulted in the beaker being full. And underlying physiological responses, fight, flight, freeze. We talk a lot about these, like all mammals, when we perceive or are under threat, particularly life threat, our options are limited. And polyvagal theory speaks well to the particular ways that our bodies respond under this type of threat. As Steve Porges himself says, our bodies respond in such a way that they don't really allow the cognitive part to come to the table to negotiate how we'll respond. So the main focus here is, again, several different things. Students receive instruction on, or they receive little instruction rather, on somatic or bottom-up therapeutic approaches. So we spend quite a bit of time around that because they get more cognitive therapeutic approaches in many different areas of their educational curriculum. This course can be flexibly adapted to an 8 or 11-week format. So right now, for example, I'm teaching an 8-week trauma course to two different classes. In the spring, it's 11 weeks. We're very careful to say to students that this is not a training to work in trauma, but they're going to get some exposure to what practicing in a somatically based therapeutic orientation would look like. And they're going to come out of the course with a real foundation in trauma, but it's not a training. We also have a trauma-informed approach to teaching, in part because we're very cognizant of what Newman has called hidden survivors in the classroom. So instructors need to be very aware in this kind of course around the students and what they themselves may have experienced. So I'm very careful to say, for example, that if any student is triggered in the class, they can leave class temporarily. They don't need to participate in exercises or watch a video. So those are by invitation, really. And I think the instructors in a course like this need to become the container to hold student anxieties about the course material. So interpersonal neurobiology and neuroscience, we teach about the autonomic nervous system. What is trauma, as I mentioned a few moments ago? We give a historical overview of the field of traumatology, starting with the early work of Pierre Genet. And interestingly, a lot of the knowledge about trauma has come from war. So we talk about that and how trauma is reflected and has been historically in the DSM process as well. We teach students about affect regulation theory, That is how we learn developmentally to regulate our feelings. Polyvagal theory I've spoken to. And neuroplasticity, as I'm sure you're all aware, is the capacity of the brain to change. But we also talk about Rick Hanson's concept of self-directed neuroplasticity, which he describes as using our mind to change our brain. That is by virtue of decisions that we make, what sort of circumstances we put ourselves into. We teach about somatic psychotherapy, usually do a demo in front of the class, and encourage students in an exercise around tracking sensation, which they often discover is, well, it appears deceptively simple. It's actually quite complex. And we talk a lot about becoming safely embodied, and also working with dissociation is really important as well. We talk about attachment theory as part of this curriculum and its clinical implications, really emphasizing students exploring their own, with self-compassion, their own attachment style, as this knowledge will help them in their interactions with clients. A lot about the therapist-client relationship. We teach about CBT as a cognitive intervention and somatically based psychotherapy, as I mentioned. Also, post-traumatic growth, mindfulness, and the caveats around mindfulness that many people think that practicing mindfulness and meditation and so on is a good thing, but it's important for students who are going to be working with traumatized clients to be aware that it is risky. It can lead to, for some clients, flashbacks and emotional overwhelm. We talk about mirror neurons and attunement in psychotherapy, and also social justice implications, language practices around interpersonal violence, boundaries in psychotherapy, transference and countertransference, feelings that the therapist can have towards their clients in working in this area. So, strengths of this curriculum. Well, students leave the course with a breadth of knowledge that we feel is essential to working with traumatized individuals. The emphasis in this program on increasing student awareness of how largely unconscious dynamics between the therapist and client can manifest in therapeutic enactments, ruptures, impasses. So this promotes resilience, I think, for the therapist. Clinical supervision, awareness of how to ethically and clinically manage situations, building in student self-efficacy, and awareness and skills building are necessary steps in promoting student resilience in working in this area. Some limitations. An 8 or 11-week course is necessarily limited with respect to helping students develop skills. An additional time would allow for more role plays, feedback from instructors to students, and what I would call intentional practice in this area. And consistent feedback that we get from, I've been teaching this course for 7 or 8 years now. Consistent feedback from students is that a trauma course should be 5 credits, not the current 3 credits, as all students will be working in part with trauma in both their practicum and internship sites and in their careers as practitioners. And in the end of course evaluation, students typically report that, well, they had some fears coming into the course around the neurobiology and the possible heaviness of a course around trauma. They find it really relieving that the course was taught in the way that it was. So it's very good to hear that. And covering the foundations of interpersonal neurobiology, some skill building. As we said in our paper, our hope is that this course contributes substantially to the preparation of students, that is, to increase their resilience when faced with trauma, and to have confidence that they can work more ethically and effectively with this population. Thank you. And finally, some references that were the basis of this talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that wonderful talk, Dr. Manley. I, as you know, taught the trauma course for many years as well, so I have questions, but I will keep those for the Q&A. We have not been able to make contact with our second group, so we're going to go directly to our final speaker. The topic is expert-driven LLM prompt completions, augmenting user experience score in academic research. And our colleague is coming in from China and has been with us for some hours. Thank you so much, Gerald, for getting up very, very early to join the conference. While he loads his slides, oh, I think I see that. Yes, if you want to go ahead and change it to slideshow, then you can proceed. Over to you.
Can you see my slideshow?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much, and we can see you and we can hear you. Take it away.
Yeah, I've been the whole night up because the session starts here at when it's almost 11 p.m. and ending now it's in the morning.
And we thank you for your diligence and commitment. You are the closing speaker of the last 3 days. So take it away.
Yeah, so Muriega, habari zenyu, ni hao. So, as all of you, I had a very good discussion earlier on, and the question was raised on about LLM trust. How do we trust them and all these? And I believe as I was listening to so many speakers, they're experts in various fields and various domains. But in one way or the other, when they're using ChatGPT, for instance, which are embedded with the architecture of large language models, there are limitations in use of all these. And that's why we embedded on this research. And to kick it, we say, how then can we involve experts? And we say that experts inputs on prompt compression. And in this case, what we mean by prompt compression, we mean the output that you get when you prompt. Those are the compressions we're talking about. So expert inputs are adaptive socio-technical alignment that optimizes the resilience of these large language models for complex contemporary academic application. Human oversight via experts' input in prompt compression can serve as structural reinforcement learning mechanism, leveraging expert feedback to enhance large language model robustness. This is achieved by utilizing both implicit and explicit signals, such as direct linking and inferred intent, to optimize model behavior. Multimodal large language models, for instance, like ChatGPT, increasingly generate system-level optimization by scaling computation power, enhancing data efficiency. This model operates under low-level structure formats and length and high-level semantic stylistic constraint to produce user-centered prompts compression. Large language model programming via prompt engineering, scripting, enables flow control and task-specific costing specification, thereby reducing operational costs and improving task management. However, this mechanism exposes limitation in natural language processing, like the way we are talking and conversing, particularly in terms of encoding and decoding, fidelity, and generalization of compression. Large language models compressions remain bounded to training, like when we had the issue of trust issue coming up in this conversation, that they remain bounded to training data and retrieval mechanism, restricting inference to known and accessible knowledge. To mitigate this constraint, in-context learning leverages a mixture of expert architecture that generate few-shot learning capability at inference time. Mixture of expert model match performance of dense architecture while remaining significantly low computational power. In our introduction, in the current landscape is large language models, expert involvement, whether through peer collaboration, senior oversight, or domain-specific specialization, drive advanced learning and knowledge transfer in AI systems. Human expert anchor epistemological learning by actively dispensing knowledge through structured and informal channels. AI-based systems include machine learning models, large language model expert system, serve as a facilitator for this process, but cannot replicate the humanistic dimension of socialized learning. This system generates computational scaffolds of knowledge exchange, yet irrepressible nuance of human judgments remains central to expert-driven decision-making. As AI evolve, they encounter epistemic uncertainty, such as misalignment and factual inaccuracies, and anthropomorphic misdistribution that undermines the reliability in domain-specific application. So current prompt architecture position large language models are the authoritative generators, and that's the biggest challenge we are having. So because they generate sometimes ubiquity in complex academic contexts and misalignment in domain-specific knowledge and limited resilience in specialized tasks. So, in that, we found there's a big, based on research and literature review, we found there's a big research in terms of insufficient human oversight mechanism and limited integration of expert knowledge and need for adaptive socio-technical alignment. Because what we are envisioning is for us to have more adaptive, more reflexive large language models that work together hand in hand with the users. But in instance how these GPT models are being used, they are not in tandem with the user behavior or user experience in this interaction. So with that, we formulated a solution and asked ourselves, how do we engage by having expert input in prompt compression as an adaptive mechanism to enhance large language models' resilience in academic research through structured human oversight and reinforcement learning. We generated three main objectives, and one objective was to optimize large language models. That is, we investigate whether experts in the loop feedback, that is founded on the concept of human reinforcement learning through human feedback process, that is, us having expert in the loop feedback, can systematically optimize prompt completion based on user experience in academic research. The second one was to explore whether embedding expert validation in reinforcement learning loop can enhance large language model performance, mitigate misalignment, and improve factual alignment. And establish expert in the loop as a hybrid framework for human large language model collaboration, enhancing quality, trust, and usability in academic context. For this, our main expert input in completion was as a higher construct variable, was guided by two lower construct variables, which was exploratory learning. How do the expert input can improve in terms of exploratory learning, in terms of enhancing curiosity and learning-initiated engagement. The other one is in terms of accuracy, reducing hallucination, improve factual alignment. Then the other one is incentives, what motivate experts to participate in and quality contribution. So in these, we are looking at directory, how then do that lead to generation of, since we want to have a reflexive system, how does that lead to us generating implicit signals? That is the interaction patterns, and also the implicit signals, because these signals are what now gives us a reflexive large language models that is more responsive to the user experience and in this ecosystem. And our dependent variable was user experience score or dimension, which were around satisfaction, performance, versatility, and adaptability. We used a mixed method. We had the survey. We used quantitative methods whereby we had a survey of 270 participants. We did it in Kenya and China, and also we had an A and B testing results, A and B testing experiments, which we did it in USA and UK. We got responded from USA and UK. And our data analysis, we were able to use SPSS and Smart PRS for data analysis, whereby SPSS. So expert input on completion, we realized that it can significantly utilize user experience score, whereby expert input on prompt completion demonstrates statistically significant improvement in user experience across satisfaction, performance, and adaptability dimension, whereby we can see from our survey result that EIPC, that is expert input on completion, was significant in terms of the user experience score, in terms of performance, satisfaction, and adaptability. In the A and B testing, we had two conditions. One, we had prompts that were purely generated by LLM. And another one, we had compressions that were generated by LLMs, but also manipulated, and expert had added their input into them. And you can see that within both of them were significant, but we can see the mean of the experts, the SEs or the outputs that had also inputs of the expert had a higher mean than those without. And so that shows that there is importance of us bringing on board expert within this pipeline and this process of completion generation. And so our mediating was quality assurance and prompt experience. So quality assurance in the LLM mediate significantly was significant as a mediator in the relationship between EIPC, that is expert inputs on completion, and user experience score in academic research. And also we found the same was replicated in terms of prompting experience. The moderators we had two, which was credibility, which significantly in this case we are using simple slope, and we can see that credibility amplifies the relationship between expert inputs and UX, and also cognitive effort also amplifies the same relationship. So that means that there's importance, the credibility of these experts and the process and the cognitive effort, that when these experts are there, they're able to ease in the cognitive effort of the users. In academic, Liam, we can say this enhances research quality through expert validation. That's the importance of expert input on completion, the implication. They improve contextual relevance in specialized domain. And they also reduce misalignment with domain-specific knowledge. And also they're able to enhance sustained cognitive engagement in complex tasks. That is in academic, whereby it's more specialized, complex task. And in AI system, there's this creates a way on which we can have trustworthy AI with a human oversight, not just have an AI stand alone, but an AI which is collaborating together with the experts. And also it builds on the argument for us to have a system resilience against ubiquity, whereby for this system to be more resilient and adaptable to these issues of trust, issues of misalignment, issues of bias, we cannot allow this large language model to operate out in opaque, whereby they are not involving the experts. Like what is happening currently, the experts are not involved in this pipeline because the entities that own these systems, they are the one who make the decision. They are the one who make the decision of the training data. They are the one who make the decision on what inputs and what codes, how they are going to train this model, fine tune them. So the end users who are students, in most cases, they are lecturer who are experts or domain experts in this field, have no say in that pipeline. And at the end of the day, they are leading to misalignment, to biases, and this is the main problem you're having. But if we are able to introduce experts within that pipeline, that the experts are involved, then we'll be able to have a more resilience, large language models, more resilience GPTs in engagement in academic context. And the other one, they can enforce learning mechanism, and they can improve factual alignment in high-stake application. In this case, high-stake application is academia. So expert augmented large language model represent a hybrid approach that balances AI capability with human expertise, creating more resilience and contextually appropriate system for academic research. Our key finding is EIPC significantly improved UX score, moderation by credibility and cognitive effort, and mediation is through prompt experience and quality assurance. This enhances system resilience against misalignment. For future research, we recommend a further research towards across domain validation, other researchers to use different contexts, longitudinal studies, whereby if these systems are going to onboard experts, they are going to bring experts on board. How does that act up for a certain period of time? Then optimize expert selection criteria, then integration of multimodal large language model architecture. Implementation is to have standardized expert review protocols, automate expert LLM feedback loops, and quality assurance metrics for academic context and incentive structure for expert participation. In this case, we say that expert augmented large language model represent a paradigm shift to a more resilient, trustworthy, and contextually appropriate AI system for academic research. And with that, I can say thank you. And the only way to discover the limit of possibility is to go beyond them. And in this case, if large language models, owners of this large language model like ChatGPT, if they are able to onboard experts within this system, like the conversation we have had, if all that knowledge is to be onboarded, because we are learning short of training data, we have limitation of training data, limitation of expert, mixture of expert. If we are able to bring experts in all domains on board to this large language model pipeline, then we'll be able to improve their functionality. Yet, because we cannot function outside large language model, we have all of us to collaborate. But that collaboration have to be mutual, whereby experts together with LLM are working hand in hand for us to have a more reflexive large language models. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gerald. I'm using your first name to make sure that I don't mispronounce your last.
Yes.
That was wonderful. I have ethics questions for you, but I'm not going to jump the queue. I am going to invite Doctors Aditi and Manley to join us on screen. Turn on your cameras, turn on your microphones. Dr. Domingo is already in the line with questions. I'm sure there will be more. Go ahead, Dr. Domingo, take it away.
Thank you, and thank you to the presenters for this wonderful session. It's been a wonderful conference. I have 3 separate questions. I will ask them first and then let the respondents respond accordingly.
I'm just going to pause and ask Gerald to unshare so that we can see you.
Okay. My first question is for Gerald. Thank you. I had recently learned of something I've been doing, but has a name called prompt injecting in large language models. And so how does this idea of EIPC shift the boundaries of the human-machine interaction as you're talking about it? To me, it is a very, first of all, can you sort of articulate some of the nuances between this? Is this a form of prompt injecting? And then the human-machine interaction. So that's the question for you. The question for Dr. Manley, to what extent does your approach on interpersonal neurobiology, as you teach it, provide a framework for addressing collective intergenerational trauma? And finally, Dr. Abdi, for you, the question I have is, wonderful to talk about authentic assessment. We know as educators, this is something we need to do more of, yet it is still not gaining traction, en masse. How can we convince those perhaps in charge administrators to adopt this with more vigor? So Gerald, I'll start with you and then to Dr. Manley and Abdi.
I would say prompt injection is when people use malicious way to inject bad things. Like 1 year ago, bad AI was able to generate a racially biased completions. So prompt injection is when people use malicious way to be able to put input within this prompt and manipulate it for bad things, which is not the right way.
Okay, so malicious intent.
Yes, it's malice. It's geared toward malice. So how this one shift, how EIPC shift the boundary is because when we are training when you are looking at fine-tuning or training this model, at the phase of mixture of experts, they are just involving the experts there, that is the computing experts within their platform. Let's say like OpenAI. Currently, you saw some of these OpenAI bringing lawyers on board and bankers on board so that they can be able to generate models that fit argument functions within the banking system. Meaning that if they are bringing bankers on board and people in the Wall Street, why are they not bringing people in trauma area, people in psychology, people in all other fields? And when you think about it, within the academia, we have all this space of so many experts dealing with very diverse knowledge, very diverse domains. And this knowledge is not being inputted, or we are not onboarding this knowledge within the large language models. So what you find that even when you prompt a query within these prompts, they don't give you adequate answer, or the answers is limited because they don't have that training data. You're the one who is doing research every day. But if you're saying like the ChatGPT 5 is trained on the data up to 2023, it doesn't have the most recent data, then it will also be skewed and it will also be misaligned in terms of the completion it's generating for you. So what this shift, my approach, what a shift is, we bring lead time on board current experts who are knowledgeable within that domain, within the large language model ecosystem, within this pipeline. And that's what we are saying. Let it not this large language model assume it's all-knowing, because currently students are taking these large language models as an all-knowing person, all-powerful. And what happened is that the student end up regurgitating and giving answers which are inadequate. Even you as a tutor, you're feeling these students are missing something. So we need to bring on board this ecosystem the same way we are doing in class. Let's take the same interaction within these technological spaces, AI spaces, because LLM usage will still continue and students will still continue using them. But when you're not there and students are engaging with them, then they are missing out on key knowledge from experts.
Thank you.
Okay.
Dr.
Who
Manley?
else?
Oh,
Who else would like to go?
I had a question for the other two, but
Yeah, Jackie, I can attempt to address Dr. Domingo's question.
Yes, please.
Yeah, well, this is a great question. And we're certainly not in this course in any way pathologizing the individual, because we're thinking about, obviously, with intergenerational trauma and collectivist trauma. We don't really know at this point what the mechanism of transmission is. For intergenerational trauma, probably the most salient current theory, I think, is epigenetics, but we don't know. And there's a lot about this that we don't know. I think about this a little bit in terms of one of the things that comes up in teaching this course is, or used to, although I presented some information on Friday and there weren't many questions around it, are cultural differences around attachment processes. That in collectivist cultures, students often have a lot of questions around, well, what if the child is raised by numerous people as opposed to in the West, just one father or one mother, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the real questions for attachment theory, and I think trauma these days, is all cultures, I mean, we can't not attach, but I think all cultures, and this is from a paper that I read recently, all cultures need to provide some sort of a framework for children to be safely raised to reproductive age from an evolutionary point of view in order that the species continue. So that's something that all cultures need to provide, whether it's a collectivist culture or an individual one. The other part of the course that I didn't speak a lot to was the social justice framework. So we really focus on interpersonal violence and language analysis so that students become more media savvy about how these things are talked about. We talk to some degree about community healing practices and advocacy for therapists, and with a real emphasis on safety. And I don't think that there's a contrast between the way that we're proposing that somatic approach to healing trauma is the idea that, as Porges himself has said, the original trauma was bad enough. But what's continuing to happen is that it's carried forward in the autonomic nervous system of the people that we see. So when we're working with those people, even though it's intergenerational trauma, I think the processes would be at least similar. There may be some differences that we don't know about at this point in time. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. And it echoes me back to neurophysiology back in my undergrad. So thank you. I appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Dr. Abdi.
So to your question, how to increase the use of authentic assessments in classrooms. I would say that authentic assessment actually becomes sustainable only when both instructional design and school culture, the school environment supports this meaningful and real-world learning. So before we try to incorporate authentic assessments, I think the teachers need to be able to provide authentic learning experiences to the students. So research in authentic pedagogy or assessment literacy, performance assessment task designs, and I mean several other studies, they have identified various strategies for increasing the use of authentic assessments in classrooms. And very fortunately, I've been part of the teacher education workshops with the designer of this framework, Dr. Kim Ko at University of Calgary, where we collaboratively designed and implemented some of these principles. So, in actual, what we did in those workshops was, I mean, those were part of the in-service teachers and the pre-service teachers. You know, teacher training during the summer program. So what we did was we tried to strengthen teachers' assessment literacy because teachers need explicit, very clear support and a concrete professional development and professional design blueprint to be able to design and select and use authentic assessments in classrooms. And for this, we can build this capacity by, for instance, providing professional learning opportunities for teachers in which those which can focus maybe on task design, rubric development, and then following the rubrics, in verbatim and constructive feedback and alignment. We can talk about, introducing some examples and some models of high quality performance assessment tasks. We can take these tasks from the classrooms or from maybe an external assessment agency and offer collaborative design workshops for teachers, and where teachers actually co-create these tasks aligned with the standards of school boards or maybe higher education, any specific discipline. So training teachers on scaffolding, and then academic language areas, maybe disciplinary discourse within the performance tasks. These are some of the ways which I think will be helpful. And we, in fact, at the first stage, we try teachers to bring in their own samples of the assessments from their schools. And whatever situation that those tasks were at, we asked them to actually redesign them using the AIQ framework, because the AIQ framework gives the whole perspective, the whole framework. It's the theoretical framework, which is at the back of the authentic assessment. And as I said, I mean, aligning authentic assessments with the curriculum and instructions, which was also part of my research, I think, and then using backward design. One of the features of those, workshops could be for the teachers to be able to, use the backward design to align the tasks with the learning outcomes. And and then, of course, after we ask them to remodel their previously made assessments, we ask them to create from the scratch, the task from the scratch. And then we had this, feedback sessions and then the peer feedback. So that was very interesting experience for me, and I think that was the time because my Dr. Ko, she made me part of this activity, and I think that was the reason I started looking into authentic assessment very carefully and interesting.
Great. No, wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Our next question goes to Dr. Kariwo.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Linda. I have 3 questions, but I'll take them one at a time. The first one is to Ron. My understanding is that there are different types of trauma. So the question to you is, if there are different types of trauma, are there then different types of resilience in terms of building resilience?
Yes, thank you for the question, Dr. Curio. Different types of traumas tend to when we look at this from a polyvagal point of view, different types of traumas, I'm not sure if sometimes people refer to small t trauma, big T trauma, which doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Or if you're thinking about different types of trauma in the sense of car accidents, high impact trauma versus relational trauma. Yes, the treatments tend to differ. I think relational trauma, which is abuse, betrayals, anything that involves another person, I think the treatment tends to be different than it does with other classes of trauma. But ultimately, the impact on the nervous system, because we all have an autonomic nervous system, as a result of life threat, we tend to respond in these different ways. And so trauma tends to be, according to some contemporary theories, gets stuck in the nervous system. And there's different types of therapies that attempt to help discharge that kind of stuck energy or help people complete responses that couldn't have been completed at the time of the original trauma. So I'm not exactly sure what you mean by resilience.
Yes. I think the second set of trauma that you addressed is the one that I had in mind.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, there's I mean, I found in my own practice, and I think this is pretty widely substantiated, that for people that have experienced relational trauma, often there's been no repair. And so I think when people get an experience of repair, it actually strengthens their efficacy and strengthens and builds a sense of resilience. So in times in psychotherapy, for example, my own experience has been when there's been some sort of misattunement or something that's been a kind of relational rupture, where there's repair, it actually strengthens the person's resilience and capacity for relational functioning.
Thank you so much. The next question is to Gerald. I get the sense from your presentation that you are talking of resilience in the instruments themselves, the AI models. Does your research go deeper and look at how the users also can need resilience, or you just stop with the resilience in the sense of the instruments themselves? Do you go into seeing how the users, the human beings, also need to build their resilience? You are muted, Gerald. You are muted.
Okay, we didn't extend to given these it will be wide. So currently, what we did, we only looked at the interaction between the user and the system. And our main specialization was how do we augment large language models. The main research direction was how do we augment large language models for human AI collaboration. And in this case, we looked at mostly the user-machine interaction. We never went deeper now to look at the user behavioral alteration or manipulation on how do we make the user further adapt to this. The scope was limited to the interaction between the user and the machine.
Okay.
Yes.
That's fair. That's fair enough.
Yes.
My last question is to Dr. Abdi. Assessments are quite controversial. Any assessment, any form of assessment is quite brings in controversy. So I was looking at your presentation, and I'm interested to find out how you would actually make sure that assessments for the early grades 1 to 3, are culturally relevant so that you build resilience in them. Quite a lot of the assessments that I come across are really based on Western approaches and may not be appropriate for other cultures, and that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you very much for asking this interesting question. Well, authentic assessments, they come from a different, corridor and from a different street. because authentic assessments rests on the constructivist belief and beliefs and the principles that learning is contextual. So we already, look at learning as being as something which is contextual, and that's something which is grounded in students' personal and meaningful experience. So as students, construct new knowledge when it is relevant to them and make it their own through their own, their interactions with their peers and with others and the physical world that they live in, from this point actually it starts making meaning to them. So they build knowledge by manipulating, criticizing, creating, exploring the new information to fit their beliefs and their prior experiences. So this the question of cultural aspect, it automatically comes into it.
Yeah, I was also thinking about early grades. If you're talking about constructivism, you are also expecting them to be taking part in the construction of knowledge. And I'm looking at grade one, grade two. How does that happen?
Mainly, when we look at the types of, authentic assessments or the tasks that the teachers deal with, they usually focus on the comprehension, the analyzing aspects, the evaluating of a text, which could come from, their own students' own culture or cultural background, from their cultural beliefs, or the text that they are culturally familiar with, and then explaining that phenomena, for example, and then making an argument out of it, or maybe justifying. For example, um, if a student comes from India, and then a text could come, could be about Diwali, about how they celebrate and how the event started, originated from, and probably something, an argument that is coming out of it. So another example of authentic assessment could be students looking at or writing a letter, as probably I mentioned in my presentation, to an editor of a newspaper, in which in fact they are just suggesting to include a new animal to a zoo, and then they justify why do they need to include this particular animal, and the reason. So I think, I mean, from they could probably talk about their own experiences from wherever they are culturally embedded in. So this is my understanding on this.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Dr. Demeke, you are up.
Okay, my question is for Dr. Abidi. It's I go back to what Dr. Domingo was asking you, how to make this, bring it to fruition and have it part of a practice of schools, because some of the assessments that I'm familiar with, there used to be until very recently, for example, they would show newly arrived immigrant newcomers a picture of a park in which there are many culturally embedded symbols. For example, there was one picture that showed somebody drinking out of a carton of juice. Another one, an umpire, which happens in a game that is student is very unfamiliar with. And then when they improved it, they came up with an assessment for K to grade 6 students, a short video, a 2-minute video that doesn't have any voice, any text, non-visual text, in which a young man is looking for a lost book or something like that, and then ends up getting something from a food vendor, an automatic vending machine, and then goes on to take pictures with a Polaroid camera. All of these cultural symbolisms are very much embedded in Western advanced notions of what life includes, and would be very unfamiliar to somebody who came from
They are.
Dadaab refugee camp and has trauma and displacement and all kinds of mental, health problems. Is it fair to have somebody like that being tested in a very culturally embedded examination? And so I go back to what I understood Dr. Domingo was asking. What are the barriers for moving the needle on this issue of really social justice as I see it? And how do parents can be viable stakeholders in making things move in the right directions, if any?
I think your question is very pertinent and it is so relevant to our current Canadian context that it is very unfortunate that students coming from outside of Canada, those immigrant students, they do really feel and face all these problems because as my study revealed that the teachers are not ready. They are in fact very, very confused about the definition of what assessment is or the purposes of assessment, and very simple questions that we used to ask in those teacher education or teacher assessment literacy workshops that I've been part of. They gave you all sorts of answers, but of course, rambling about, beating about the bush. So that really showed, and the study also really showed that there is a dearth, there is a deficiency on part of teacher preparation, maybe coming out of their teachers' own lack of or maybe inadequate, teacher education or maybe preparation programs, or maybe from the policy perspective, I would say that that has not been on the top agenda. And again, the problem has been lack of teachers understanding or maybe preparedness in terms of assessment literacy, and hence the problem when the students come from outside of Canada, they're not able to understand how to deal with those children, and having 5 to 7 or 5 to 12 different languages and cultural backgrounds. Our teachers are really baffled, on the ground. So this is, I would say, a very unfortunate situation. But the starting point of all, of addressing this issue could be, strengthening teachers' assessment literacy, and it will, of course, start with the universities who are preparing students in their programs. And those universities need to be looked into. Their programs need to be probably redesigned in order to, cater to this crucial problem.
Thank you.
We have a question. We have a question in the chat.
Okay.
I posted it in the. It was from the Q&A. I posted it in the chat. It's for Gerald.
Yes.
I'll read it out. Gerald, can you read? Are you able to see it?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, go ahead.
The question to Gerald. I have been learning about AI curiously and concerned about the ethical practice in AI development and application. Currently, the US and China are leading in AI technologies. Recently, I've been thinking from the future end user perspective. I realized that many ordinary people in China cannot access a number of global platforms, such as Gmail, Yahoo, LinkedIn. So they are only using Chinese developed LLMs like Duobao and DeepSeek. Does this mean that the world in AI future will be too polarized or totally separated? I'll say we can look at that question in different dimensions. It's both objective and subjective. In this case, so far, if coming from the Southern perspective, I would say that the AI ecosystem is also against the developing countries. But in this case, when you pit China against the United States, there are a number of very gray areas to argue about in this question. Because when you say that China also, they have like QQ, their own email, they have their own version of LinkedIn, they have their own version of all these platforms. But the main issue from where I stand and having attended some of like data conferences, the main issue we'll be fighting for is data and energy. Why? And in this conference, I would like to give more information into this and say, there are predictions that there will come a time that the token used in AI will be equivalent to the number of energy or the token of energy used. And that means that we are going more to power and the computing capability of countries. So countries which are ahead, yes, we can say is China and number of and USA. But there are also limitations in that in terms of data. They don't have enough data to train these models because even people like Elon Musk denoted and said that by 2027, they don't have enough robot training data to train these models. So these models are still skewed. We can't say that they will optimally be polarized because yes, you may have the computing capability, but the raw resource that is required to train these models is still data. When Denmark came on board and said they are going to protect their own citizen data to be used in training and generating, let's say, images for this model, then that brings the whole question of how do you look at this question, objectively or subjectively? Because objectively, I can say with AI, with AI competition, that USA and China, they might be good in terms of compute capability, but in terms of resource, the data that we require to train this model, they are not yet there because even them, they want data. Initially, in 2023, when ChatGPT was launched, a professor in Fudan said that they did not have enough data to train Chinese model because of lack of good label data. Yet, China reads in terms of number of LLMs in the world today. But those which are well known in the world, they are from USA and the West, Mistral from Europe. But China has, when the world had 110 from my research, China had 287 large language models. So that means they're having more, but the capability for this model to function, we still go back to data and the people. Where are the people? They're in the global south. These people are their data we need it to optimize this large language model. So what I was saying, we need to look at this issue both positively and subjectively and say there is much more opportunity for countries beyond China and USA for us to advance in terms of AI advancement beyond computing capability.
Okay. So unless there's somebody else who wants to go, I get the last questions. I have questions for everybody. I've scribbled them down. I'm going to start with Dr. Manley. I will just read my questions and then we can take them one at a time. So Dr. Manley, based on the discussion, I was wondering as I was listening to you, given the experiential nature of the way that the trauma course is being taught, what are the implications? You had talked about invisible survivors in the room, like students who are in fact survivors of trauma. Therefore, the course material could be highly triggering for them. What are the implications institutionally? Is there an argument for the trauma course in particular to screen out, screen in, screen aside, screen something, some way, somehow, for that course in particular in order to safeguard the well-being of students? That's my question for you. My question for Dr. Abedi is around cultural grief, loss, and disorientation. When somebody leaves their home, their family, their language, their food, their sense, their sensory feedback, they come to the other side of the world, nothing looks, feels, or smells the same. Now you're going to assess them. But they're not even in the same sensory network as at home. So there is a variable in terms of the assessment process that is hidden but powerful and relevant, because how they perform in the same assessment here might not be how they perform in a society that is more similar to their birth culture. What are the implications of that? That's sort of like, I imagine that's some kind of confound in the assessment findings. Can you
Dr.
speak to
Linder?
that? Yeah.
Dr. Linder, can you repeat the first part of it? Sorry, I missed it, I think.
Oh yeah. So when you're talking about students coming from other cultures to Canada, they are leaving behind all of the familiar contextual cues that help make them who they are. And so food is different, sound is different, scents are different, everything is different. So there's a grief and a loss and a disorientation that comes just with the migratory experience that absolutely surely shows up in their performance and therefore in their assessment. How is that accounted for? It seems like a very key confound in the findings. They're not even the same bodies or the same realities. I imagine if you use the same assessment in their home society or a next door society as opposed to across the world society, you're going to end up with some different data. How is that being handled? And then finally, for Mr. Gerald, I'm dying to know. You talked about the importance of specialists keeping an eye on the machine, on LLM ads. I want to know who's keeping an eye on the specialists, because there are many, many players in the game and they all have different agendas, and not all of them are ethical or pro-social. So, what is the mechanism by which those who have the power, because they have the knowledge to influence the LLMs, do we require some kind of oversight? Like, it's like the Wild West out there right now. People are building whatever they want. They're feeding whatever they want into the system. Garbage in, garbage out. Yes, but evil in, evil out. And it seems to me there need to be some ethical gateways and gatekeeping going on for such an incredibly powerful and explosive technology as AI. Okay, Dr. Manley, you first.
All right, Dr. Linder, what a great question. And I would begin by saying that the course is not mostly experiential. It is
Okay.
it is mostly didactic.
Okay.
So I go into any one class with probably 50 to 60 slides,
Okay.
use those based on where the discussion takes us. So I tell students I'm not the kind of instructor that needs to get through the slides. It's more important, of course, for us to have really interesting discussions. And the students, as a faculty, I really feel that the students, there's a lot of pressure between balancing breadth of knowledge with depth.
Mm,
And so students are really hungry for skills, but I'm
mm,
reluctant to teach ethically, to teach skills if they don't have the foundational knowledge in which to place them. So I realize there are survivors in the class. I would not be in favor of screening people out because of the ethics around that. I do talk to students who express some fears around the heaviness of some of the material. It actually turns out to be far less heavy than they think it's going to be.
mm.
And I also say to students, look, you know, if you're triggered in class, how are you going to manage when you're sitting in front of a client?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Really encourage them to think about that. So, yeah, I think that, and also the class, I think functions. I mean, I just know the feedback that I get with mid-course and end-of-course evaluations, um, safeguarding the well-being of the students. And I think the faculty here has to be, to some degree, a neurobiological regulator
Mm,
for students and to be a container. I think the only process that maybe is a little, but students are so interested in this, is encouraging them to learn about their own attachment processes, and to become aware. And there's no pathologizing of any of this, insecure attachment styles. I mean, from an evolutionary point of view, we could ask, why are there insecure styles? Shouldn't they have been weeded out now and everybody's secure? But I say to them, look, the reality is, you know, the percentages of insecure styles are quite high. And if you're working in a group, would you want everybody to be securely attached? Probably not.
mm.
Secure styles bring skills. So I think the focus on, covering post-traumatic growth and mirror neurons and contemplative practices and obviously some skills building around tracking sensations. I think the degree, and we have a Kahoot quiz at the end, which is really fun for the students, that corny grade one birthday party music that they play. Yeah, I haven't. And some people come up and obviously confide in me, but I've never, very, very rarely in the last 7 or 8 years have I had anybody that really couldn't manage the course.
Mm. Okay. Thank you so much. Next up, I believe, is Dr. Abidi.
Yeah, thank you very much. Immigration, indeed, especially the forced one or the unexpected immigrations that have happened, and we have seen, many families coming out from Afghanistan and Syria. Um, I mean, they create profound emotional, cultural, and academic disruptions for them. And for many newcomer students, the experiences may involve, grieving families, probably deaths in the families, or the loss of cultural identities, of course, when they land here, and finding the right community in which they could really survive, or traumas or displacements. So all these, deeply humanistic experiences show up in the classrooms as well when at any level, whichever level of, instruction or classroom that we are talking about, schools or, higher education.
Mm-hmm.
So when these show up in the classroom performance, and not only because students lack the ability, but also because the learning is so inseparable from their own identity in which they were trenched in the emotional safety. And I can relate this from one of my courses that I regularly teach. I teach family systems and conflict management to my MEd leadership students, and in one of the assignments asked them to write or create a genogram based on the various types of conflicts that have happened in the last 3 generations. And the stories that they come up with, of course, they are really heartrending, and
Mm.
sometimes so difficult for the people, for even especially for them who are narrating those stories, because sometimes they're presenting that they just break into tears, and of course the whole class has to stop, things like that. So in order to assess these students, of course this is going to need a whole different level of understanding, and especially assessment literacy, which I keep talking about. So teachers really need to use the culturally responsive, and from my own course, I could bring in the trauma-informed and assessment approaches, um, in which, for example, they are working with grief, the cultural loss, the immigration, that can impair their working memory, sometimes their attention span, because of some huge financial losses. So assessments in these situations could probably, prioritize the emotional safety for those students first, because allowing them some choices, making some accommodations, and creating some flexibility in assessment formats. And sometimes we had to add, in higher education, we had to remove some time pressures whenever it was possible in my courses, and then avoid those assessments that rely on very unfamiliar cultural contexts. And newcomer students usually bring in their multilingual experiences. They have a bank of experiences that they could bring in, and then what are the ways in which we can look into those repertoires, or maybe instead of assessing what they lack, we can, as teachers, we can probably focus on, see, okay, what do they have, what do they have to offer to the class. And that could probably teachers in classrooms can let the students express the ideas using cultural context, maybe
Mhm.
examples or metaphors, similes from their own languages, and then, allowing the use of the first language, although sometimes then teachers might not be familiar with them. But I think these strategies could really help students. And one of the things is that the assessments are not so rigid. When we talk about the authentic assessments, they're not rigid. So they allow students to express themselves in many different ways, and they leverage students' cultural and lived experiences as sort of assets. So and then instead of asking students or expecting students to uh, to do those specific tasks that are your mainstream students are looking into, the culturally responsive strategy by a teacher could be knowing students genuinely and deeply and understanding what their histories and what their strengths are. And the assessment format could be flexible, as I mentioned. Probably if they're not good at writing, if writing is not their strongest suit, they could probably present, or it could be a presentation to their peers. Maybe students can look into each other's stories, or maybe each other ideas, and then they could be the teachers, since they have allowed the students to be able to work with their peers, teachers can have that sustained dialogues with the students as well. So this kind of approach, these strategies would humanize assessments, and probably help and support immigrant students' sense of belonging to the new land where they have landed. And yeah, I think this all comes again and goes back to teachers' capabilities, which need to be investigated further. And there needs to be frameworks which need to be in place in terms of policy, in terms of the courses that our higher education institutions are offering. So it actually needs to be played in different levels.
Okay, that is wonderful. Thank you. Final response goes to Mr. Gerald. I have concerns about the ethics. Tell us your thoughts on this, please. Who is watching the specialists?
Who is watching the special? A very good question. At the same time, it's a gray area at the moment. That's what I would say, because the pace by which large language models are evolving and the pace by which even the governing frameworks, the ethical guidelines that are evolving, they are still lagging behind. But in this case, why the approach that we are proposing is novel and try to address that is because previously in the argumentation, they had like retrieval argumentation generation. What this does is large language models had inadequacies of inaccurate data. It was misaligned, they were hallucinating. So earlier on, so what they wanted to resolve that is give LLM capability to retrieve this information from credible data sources. But they got another hindrance and another problem. And the problem was the databases that hold these important information like journal articles and everything could not give permission or their IPs access to these large language models because it's all business. So what happened is they continued hallucinating because of lack of this domain. Now, coming on board now, these experts, every day they are doing research. They have their key domain research they are doing either in the university, in the labs, and they are researching more. But they are disconnected from this ecosystem or this pipeline we call large language models, or in this case, to simplify it, ChatGPT, for instance. What ChatGPT has been trying to do to augment this is through the use of a prompt engineering. That is, based on the question you ask, then it's able to predict through recommendation system, graphical neural networks, and all that. It's able to predict the kind of knowledge and use that knowledge to retrain itself and align itself to your next question or even retrain its database. But that model has faced its own challenges because in not all the times that you ask based on what you everything that you know. And so we came up with this question asking ourselves, if we bring now the experts on board and they're able to modify, that's the time now we talked about implicit and explicit feedback signals. That is, these experts are able to elicit both nuances, which are both explicit and implicit, how they feel, how they approach. Because if you're an expert, an example, the Doctor Who area, Dr. Rooney, Professor Rooney, and he talked about trauma. He's an expert in trauma. I'm not an expert in trauma. Therefore, if ChatGPT is giving prompts on trauma, he's more at a key position to address those issues and be able to rectify, direct it. But this is the problem. Now coming to your question about who now keeps an eye on the specialists. What we have is, if we have all the specialists on board and we have a probability interface whereby they can all add something to this prompt, what happens is there's now consensus kind of an information. And that's what we are trying to hypothesize. Give power to the experts to be able also to inject their own contribution, their impact in this completion. And we are not talking about training data. It's on completion that when they train, when the LLM or ChatGPT gives a certain prompt, then you as an expert, you can always add your voice. You can always add your input into it. Then based on that input, it can use that input to refine reinforcement learning. It can use that to retrain itself and improve that model performance. And so what we have is that the initial prompt may be inadequate, but when you as an expert share your knowledge to your feedback to that completion, then the second level of completion would be much improved. So if you do it and another expert does it, what you have is a collaboration of knowledge. Then with that, we'll be now solving this whole issue of who keeps an eye on the special. Then the special
Like
keep
a
an eye on
a peer review style, which is
exactly.
right.
That's
Okay.
what we are trying to hypothesize. And now on the ethical governance issue, it's a whole murky area because these LLMs, they are moving so fast before even the guidelines and the policies. So many countries, even my country like Kenya, they're trying to come on board with AI policies. But you look at those frameworks, what they're trying to mitigate and where the AI is like we are mitigating 5 steps behind, and the AI is 10 steps forward. So it's a whole we're trying to rush. And so the best solution would be, can the expert come on board and regulate and be able to collaborate? And with that, we'll be having more richer, aligned knowledge. And we mitigate some of this misalignment and hallucination we're having in large language models, pipeline, and ecosystem and context.
Wonderful, wonderful final notes. We will keep an eye on each other is the bottom line there. I like it. I like it. It's worked for academia for a few hundred years, so no doubt it will work for AI as well. So that brings us to the end of our time for session 12, as well as the end of our conference. Nexus 2025 Interdisciplinary Conference has come to a close. I want to offer a special thank you to all the presenters that have been with us for the last 3 days. A special thank you to the moderators who have guided us through all of these wonderful conversations. And a huge thank you to the admin team in the back end that was responsible for all of the technical support and the loading of slides and the emailing of presenters when they had challenges and so on and so forth. This was absolutely a team effort. I also want to acknowledge that we've had a special guest in the background for the last 2 days, which is the provost of the University of City University Seattle, who is the mothership of City University in Canada. Dr. Melissa Meekum has been with us, keeping an eye on us all for 2 days, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. So we thank her for her support. She was deeply committed to this conference, as was our president, Suzanne Walsh, who cannot be with us. She's currently in China. Gerald, she might be down the street from you. She's on a business trip to China, which is why she couldn't participate in this conference, but we have robust support from the institution as well as the faculty. It has been an absolute pleasure, a labor of love, and a true joy. For those of you who have any energy left, and if you don't have any energy, it's okay. But if you have any energy left, there is a link I've left in the chat for presenters to have a little bit of a networking meeting, as well as the organizers after this ending of the conference. Thank you all. Just as a reminder that this is an annual conference, so we're already starting to think about Nexus 2026, which is focused on imagination in action for our shared future, which will be coming to us in November 2026, and a call for papers will be going out probably in February of the new year. In the meantime, be well.